Production. So ordered. All right, today we have two resolutions regarding a very important topic right now we are experiencing not only in our state but our nation in regarding the shortage and the high cost of fertilizers and the impact, the trickle-down effect that causes on all of our food supply and our agricultural industry. We will start today with today's meeting with a presentation from Corey Rosenbusch, President and CEO of the Fertilizer Institute. Corey is joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Corey. And I'd like to share that I was very impressed with a presentation you offered not so long ago over on the Senate in a committee and as well as an event I attended. So welcome to the House Ag Committee, and we look forward to hearing what insight you might have to offer.
Great. Well, thank you, Chairwoman Alexander. Thanks for the invitation. My colleague and economist for the Fertilizer Institute, Jason Trundle, did that presentation. So sorry you're getting the B team today, but I will do my best to replicate some of the great information that he shared. My name is Corey Rosenbusch. I am the president and CEO of the Fertilizer Institute. I wish I could be there in person. I think when I was serving as a national FFA officer, I was in Lansing almost 25 years ago for a Michigan FFA event, and I'm sure things have changed just a little bit since that trip. So maybe in the future, I'll have an opportunity to make it back in person. I want to spend a few minutes this morning really talking about what's on everyone's mind, and that is the impact on the fertilizer supply chain and markets. There have definitely been a lot of things that have collided all at once to create the current environment that we're in. And needless to say, farmers are feeling that pain the most. We are indeed seeing some of our highest ever fertilizer prices really around the globe. And so the question we always get asked is what's causing this? And I think everyone wants to pinpoint one particular reason. I do a lot of conversations with trade press and media, and they want to describe it as a black swan event. I think there was a point a few months ago that we reached beyond black swan and got to pterodactyl status, because every possible thing can be thrown our way right now that is making this market complex. As we talk a little bit about some of the issues, and then I'll share some of the policy solutions that we're advocating and working with Congress here in Washington, D.C. on at the end of the presentation. But all of that really rests on the fact that about 90% of all fertilizer in the world is used outside the United States. So we make up about 10% of the global fertilizer market. And as you think about where most fertilizers are produced, China and Russia are the two dominant players. China controls about 40% of global phosphate production and about a third of all nitrogen. And then as you will see a little bit later when we talk about trade disruptions, Brazil and India are some of the two of the largest users of fertilizers from those particular sources. You have to really go back to the beginning of 2020 to understand what landed us in the current situation. And the fertilizer industry wasn't immune, sorry, no pun intended, to COVID and all of the effects on the supply chain. Some of the specific things, though, that I think affected fertilizer production were really some of the delays in plant maintenance or turnarounds, as we call them. Usually you'll see, we're talking about anywhere from $1 to $5 billion manufacturing plants that have to go through preventative maintenance every 3 to 4 years. 6 to 7 of those usually will happen in a year, and all of those got delayed in 2020 because we didn't want to see the contractors to hundreds of contractors that come on to the site during that time period. The weather events had a big impact. About 60% of all nitrogen is produced in that Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana corridor. And when the winter storm hit, we saw some of those plants go down. As a matter of fact, we saw about a 20% drop in nitrogen production in that month alone. And then, of course, Hurricane Ida further complicated matters as it came up through Louisiana, which is where not only a lot of nitrogen is produced, but a lot of natural gas. Natural gas is the core feedstock for all nitrogen fertilizers, makes up anywhere from 70 to 90% of the cost of producing nitrogen fertilizers. We saw that not only did some of those natural gas plants be taken offline, but we also saw the price of natural gas shoot up. I think it was particularly disruptive in Europe, where it reached above $25 per MMBTU, and about 40% of all nitrogen production ended up getting shuttered during that time period in Europe. So again, going back to the 90% consumed outside the US, those events impact the price of fertilizer on a global marketplace. When I started TFI, I was really excited to kind of get back to my roots. And someone asked me how things were going, and I said, well, the hijacking of the airplane in Belarus didn't help matters. And they looked at me and they said, well, I thought you went to the fertilizer industry. Well, Lukashenko's hijacking had an impact on us all in the ag space, because Belarus produces about 20% of all potash fertilizers. And obviously he was sanctioned, shut off all of that potash supply from the rest of the world. Last year, we also saw China completely ban all of their exports. So go back to our original production slide, you're talking about 40% of phosphates, a third of nitrogen being removed from the marketplace. India, which is a large procurer of that Chinese produced fertilizer, centrally procures, federal government buys all of that product, distributes it to their farmers at a subsidized price, and they had to then go out to the global market to buy vessels and vessels of product. And then, of course, to add to the complexity, the Russia invasion of Ukraine had an especially big impact on what the markets did. Just as a side note, I don't truly believe we've seen the true impact of that on the global marketplace yet. I think a lot of it is reactionary at this point. But Russia controls about 23% of all ammonia exports, and they're another 20% of potash. So if you think about it, in the matter of about a year, we've removed about 40% of the global potash supply from the marketplace. And all at a time when demand is high. I've spent a lot of time with farmers over the last 6 months. I used to say, speaking to farm groups about what's going on. And I was down in my home state of Texas in the fall, riding with a farmer during harvest. And he enjoyed having me as a captive audience to beat up on me a little bit. And so now I just say we go out to listen to farmers, because at a time when they are experiencing some bumps in crop prices, they're also seeing skyrocketing input prices. And so that is incredibly frustrating for farmers at this time. And I'll say most of them are really smart about understanding what's going on and planning and ensuring they are doing what they need to do to maintain profitability. But not all commodities are experiencing this equal. So I was with some rice farmers recently. They have not seen the same bump that maybe corn or cotton or soy has. They've seen flat prices in the environment of a very in an environment where input costs are escalating. I think the last interesting point to think about in this entire dynamic is looking back to 2008 and 2009. And you'll see we had a similar situation where prices rose, but then steeply fell. And so a lot of this market is being driven by risk and who's willing to take that risk. And that falls on the ag retailer in many cases. And so what so many of them experienced when those prices skyrocketed in 2008 was being very long in inventory, massive write-offs. One ag retailer a few weeks ago out in California told me he wrote off $1 million of fertilizer just in one day. And I think no one wanted to get into that same environment. It looked a lot like 2008. So people were very cautious about building too much inventory unless there was a direct commitment or guarantee that the farmers were going to buy it at those prices. So that's landed us a little bit of where we are today from a market perspective. What I also want to just quickly share with you is this document, which are the policy solutions that we've been sharing with Congress here in the U.S. Congress. I used to love going to Capitol Hill and asking them what they're hearing in their district and what are their constituents saying. And it was, healthcare, taxes, labor, all of the typical topics. I've stopped asking that question because I know what rule lawmakers are going to answer now, and it's the price of fertilizer. So everyone's feeling that pain, and I think everyone wants to come up with solutions. What can we do? What levers can we pull? So we've worked very hard over the last 2 months to try to give some solutions from an industry perspective of what would help alleviate some of this pressure and hopefully get supply at an affordable price to farmers. I can tell you the industry doesn't like this volatility. It creates a lot of risk. It creates a lot of exposure and, quite frankly, demand destruction. And so we outlined a few short-term items that you'll see here, such as trying to work to get China to remove their export barrier, export blockage, being very careful about what kind of sanctions are used against Russia and what impact that has. We really are encouraging farmers to ensure they're adopting, excuse me, 4R nutrient stewardship practices to make sure they're using all of their fertilizer efficiently. And then, unfortunately, this isn't something you can just flip the switch and all of a sudden, you're producing more fertilizer. Many of these plants are operating at full capacity, take years to come online. We have a potash manufacturer that's coming online there in Michigan, and anything that we can do to help bolster domestic production, I think, is a good thing, particularly as you look at the geopolitical events that can impact the market. So we want to make sure permitting is streamlined. It is absolutely absurd to us in this marketplace that the federal government has removed potash from its critical mineral list. We believe it should be on there, and we want to add phosphate rock as well, and ensure that all of these producers have the tools they need to get farmers the nutrients as they go into to spring planting season. I was recently at a farm event in Illinois, and some corn growers were talking to me about the price fluctuations and what they were experiencing, and I was just asking them a little bit about the current market dynamic, and they said, well, we went to our retailer to talk to them about buying some nitrogen, and they couldn't get it for us, and I wanted to dig a little deeper, and I think one of the things that hit me was they started talking about the price and wanting to lock something in advance, and the retailer wasn't willing to do that because of this volatility. And what we found out in the conversation is the farmer thought that meant there wasn't supply available. There is plenty of supply and production. We've caught up with some of those disruptions that happened last year or in 2020 as well. The problem is that nobody wants to take that risk and quote a price that far in advance. And so to a lot of the farming community, that means there's not supply available. And I don't want people to feel or think that's something that's a reality. I think with the weather in the Midwest, we're actually going to be quite long on inventory in some cases. It's just a matter of, is it at a price that's affordable, and ensuring we're getting that right conversation happening between the ag retailer and the farmer. So thank you again for having us. I appreciate the opportunity and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And again, we appreciate the insight you have to offer, and also mentioning the upcoming